I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy.
I urge every American of all religions and of all colors from every section of this country to join me in that cause. At times, history and fate meet at a single time in a single place to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. Long-suffering men and women peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. For the cries of pain and the hymns and protest of oppressed people have summoned into convocation all the majesty of this great government. In our time, we have come to live with moments of great crisis. Our mission is at once the oldest and the most basic of this country. To right wrong, to do justice, to serve man. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem. We are met here as Americans to solve that problem.
Please welcome Butler School of Music at the University of Texas at Austin graduate student, soprano Chantal Freeman, and assistant professor of practice, pianist Dr. Miguel Campino. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President and CEO of the LBJ Foundation, Mark K. Updegrove.
Good morning. Welcome to the first full day of the Summit on Race in America. We have a wonderful morning ahead. In our first session, we'll hear from Glenn Singleton, the author and founder of Courageous Conversation on the Illusion of Colorblindness. We'll then explore how activists and community organizers have built successful social movements to achieve greater justice and equality. That discussion will be led by Dr. Leonard Moore, the Vice President for Diversity and Community Engagement here at the University of Texas. And it will include Brittany Packnett, the co-host of Pod Save the People, and Teach for America's Vice President of National Community Alliances, and Christina Sitzin Ramirez, the founder and executive director of JOLT. And we'll conclude the morning with Dr. Peniel E. Joseph, author and founding director of the LBJ School of Public Affairs Center for the Study of Race and Democracy, as he shares his views on social justice in America today and the elusive pursuit of what Dr. Martin Luther King called the beloved community. One of the people in this community who is helping to elevate the conversation on race is Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett, the president of Huston-Tillotson University. Dr. Burnett leads the mayor's task force on institutional racism and systemic inequity. And it's my pleasure to introduce her now. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It's a great day in Austin. I had the pleasure of serving as the co-chair of the Mayor's Task Force, and Mayor Adler was actually advised not to use the word racism in the name of the task force, and he was color brave and decided to call it what it is, a task force to dismantle institutional racism and systemic inequities in Austin, in Central Texas. So that work continues, and if you want to be a part of making Austin a beloved community, then I encourage you to go and at least at a minimum read the report that came from that task force with 200 recommendations, and then to get engaged in that work. If you just Google simply, that's the new World Book Encyclopedia, Google. So if you just Google simply Mayor Adler's Task Force, Institutional Racism, that report will come up, and it's a quick read. And that work continues even to today to put in implementation plans in some of the recommendations that we had. And this morning, it's my pleasure to introduce to you one of the catalysts, because this is more than a moment in Austin, it's a movement. And every movement needs an ally and an accomplice. And Mr. Glenn Singleton of the Pacific Educational Group, and the founder, the catalyst for Beyond Diversity, Courageous Conversations, has been a catalyst for the movement here in Austin. And with the help of Leadership Austin and from the work of the task force, we have trained over 2,000 people in Austin on this Courageous Conversations. And that goes back to self-reflection and heart work. So you will see a video that captures Glenn's work and how he's committed to moving individuals from silence and fear and questions to truth and racial healing. So if you are committed today and throughout this summit, I encourage you to do that self-reflective work and then to be about action, not talk. So ladies and gentlemen, the video and the next voice you will hear is the magical Glenn Singleton. Thank you.
This monster of an ideology that was created.
Because at times I can't be myself culturally of like who I am, and the way my name is said. My name is not Ramiro, my name is Ramiro.
To separate, we had 150 people in my graduating class, and I was the only brown student. and conquer.
I just want to be viewed as someone who's good at their job and excels because of the work they do and not necessarily because of the color of my skin.
And deny.
My partner is white and I'm Latino, and we walk into stores and, people follow me around. This very thing happened like 3 weeks before, and I made it obvious to him. I was like, this woman's following me around. You noticed that, right? And he was like, she was. That's weird. Well, maybe it was just because, this or this. And I'm like, no, it's because I'm Latino.
And infiltrate, really, the minds and bodies and souls of people.
We did intern presentations this week. And one of the interns wore a suit and tie, or he wore a tie. And someone made a flippant comment, which was, oh, are you going to court? Now that's a minority person wearing a suit, dressed up because they're going to do a presentation. And the response is, you're going to court. Not, did you have a job interview? Not, did you just come from a funeral? But, oh, you're going to court. So that's where the bar is. That's the reality.
There's a lot of things that we've overcome over the ages, and this can be one of them.
Race is a thing that I think most of us would just have feelings about it, but don't really feel compelled to start talking about it.
People are so afraid to offend one another and so afraid to talk about race. It's just that big elephant in the room.
Been through many conversations about diversity, but they never lead anywhere.
It was, oh, I haven't got time. I've got 17 fires going on.
I think the first day left us with a lot of raw emotion.
A lot of the people that I work with were oblivious to how I'm living versus them.
We talked about fail harder and how for a lot of people in the agency, fail harder doesn't necessarily resonate. I don't feel like I can fail harder. I feel like my window of failure is much smaller.
It's not a level playing field, and it's not really his problem to solve. That's our problem to solve, because we want people to come here to feel safe and to do the best work of their lives, and for us to allow that and promote that. And he's been put in the worst position. That's ours to solve. I would have not known that before these days.
There are definitely times in Portland where you walk, or where you feel like you're the only person of color in a, not feel like. There have been times when you're at a restaurant and you look around and there's no one else who looks like you.
You have this realization that I am completely oblivious to the experience of other people that I work so closely with, and I am completely oblivious to my own privilege.
I was kind of blown away at the problems that we are going to have as an agency if we don't get out of the Portland and white bubble. Like, if our job is to puncture culture and create it in new places, we've got to stop talking to ourselves.
I know that I am very different at home, very different with my family and with my friends than I am at work. And I've said, I want that to stop. I want my children to be able to appreciate, be proud of the culture they come from, not feel like they have to leave it behind.
Every man and woman needs to feel that they have a right to be respected and have a right to live up to their potential.
This larger meaning, this larger context, that it's really about humanity, it's about people.
I dare you to try it. I dare you to go to that deep, dark place in your soul where you know you hide your truest feelings. Go there, acknowledge those things, and then share them. And see what reactions you get, because they might not be the ones you expect.
Good morning, fellow seekers of racial truth, justice, and healing. Good morning. My name's Glenn Eric Singleton, and I hail from Kemet, where my ancestors about 5,000 years ago proposed this amazing idea. Know thyself, distinguish knowledge and foolishness, build for eternity. My West African ancestors enslaved followed this same tradition. So did my relatives who migrated from Reconstruction through Jim Crow, the Carolinas, into the 60s, into Baltimore, where I was born into this provocative black skin. They tell me that race matters. And for each and every one of us in the room, we know that there's a story in our lives of race mattering. For each of us, the impact began long before we were born. But as we moved on, we lost our racial innocence. Indeed, we were no longer colorblind. When we first saw, felt, heard, and understood race, that's when we became color conscious. There's some things that have confused us along the way. Dreamers who one day believed that race would no longer hold significance, that at that time we would all be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Unfortunately, for Martin Luther King, many contemporaries, including many of us right here in this room, that day has yet to come. Therefore, the only thing that results in our choice not to pay attention to race and to practice colorblindness is an unwillingness to notice increasing racial disparity in this country and the growth of a more sophisticated and insidious racism. To this point, I would like you to consider the following question. And this is a question that we begin our work, each and every one of us, around race. Discovering, in fact, how much is my life impacted by race? Now, for some of us, losing our racial innocence was a traumatic event. So traumatic that we have spent a lifetime attempting to heal from that trauma, or perhaps completely erased the memory. For others, relinquishing colorblindness or race or color might have been humorous, perhaps profound, provocative, or even a source of pride. Nonetheless, growing up in America, it is virtually impossible to escape the phenomena we all eventually learn to be race. Race has mattered for more than 400 years in this country. Racial disparities show up in education, the criminal justice system, in our corporate sector, nonprofit, as well as the arts and entertainment. I lost my racial innocence at the tender age of 12. Previously, I knew I was black, but it really did not have a whole lot of meaning to me. In fact, I figured everyone was black, except those, of course, who appeared on TV, or the people that my mom was talking to on the telephone when a bill was due. Upon deeper reflection, non-black people also existed in retail stores and about the city of Baltimore, but just not in my neighborhood. My doctors, my dentists, my teachers, everyone in church, everyone in the community, my family, everyone in West Baltimore was black. This I knew, but I said such information had very little currency. It meant very little to me. I knew there was race, but I didn't know the meaning of it. Upon graduating from Hilton Elementary School, PS 21 in Baltimore City, and being admitted to the Park School, by the first day of my summer school activity, I was no longer racially unconscious. Now immersed in a private, predominantly Jewish day school, I instantaneously saw and questioned and fought and understood and manipulated race as an essential way of getting from one day to the next. I found it fascinating that 98% of the students pictured and the entire faculty had not thought of themselves as white. When referring to me as one of the black students, the diversity, they would find it offensive that I labeled them white rather than Jewish or smart. This was a confusing time for me, as I noticed students who were so privileged to now have all of the teachers look like them, the curriculum reflect their experience, just as I had once had that experience in Baltimore City Public Schools. I can tell so many stories of how my white classmates and teachers struggled to understand how it was that my best friend Jimmy, you have a 50-50 chance, how we appeared, how we acted, how we thought, how we talked. It was very difficult for them, and the breakdown in our interracial relationships most often occurred because my white classmates and teachers never took the time to observe, examine, and determine what it meant to be white in a racialized school, society, and nation. Because my classmates could identify that Jimmy and I were black, and I was certain that they were not colorblind, it was not much later that I was able to define a state of perpetual racial ignorance as both willful and harmful. Willful in the fact that from a very young age, my classmates, aided by the teachers, resisted discoveries, resisted insight about their own historic and contemporary racial story and predicament. Instead, they chose to deflect, diminish, and be delusional about race and its impact on their lives. This was harmful, particularly because when their ignorance resulted in statements that I found hurtful, or in a way that I found in my presence an inability to simply navigate from day to day. I would characterize my classmates not as colorblind, nor would I characterize my later classmates at the University of Pennsylvania and Stanford as colorblind. What I would say is that they were wearing race blinders, blinders which shielded them from recognizing and examining the true meaning of racial privilege in a racist society, deeply stratified by race. Conversely, every time I remained silent in the face of such privilege, racism, and harmful stratification, my color mute as I was reinforcing and supporting their colorblind engagement. Perhaps some of you here have participated in one side of that equation. So courageous conversation out of my 7th grade experience was there to elevate racial consciousness and promote racial healing. My work over the past 30 years has been to raise consciousness and promote this healing in a world deathly afflicted by the disease of racism. As a first step to teaching educators, advertisers, municipal workers, and entertainment professionals how to have a courageous conversation about race, one which dignifies each human being while holding each of us responsible for not embracing racial ignorance and not perpetuating racial injustices and inequities. I developed courageous conversation to enable people to completely abandon colorblindness, see race, and survive in a racialized society once their racial innocence has been lost. This protocol takes over a day to introduce the 4 agreements, the 6 conditions, and the compass. But I did want to give you just a little snapshot of it in one of the parts that I think can be helpful as we navigate over the next day. This is the compass. And the compass allows us to look between and among the different aspects of who we are and how we enter this conversation. Some of us entering from a place of intellect, some of us entering from a place of morality, some of us entering from a place of emotion, and some of us entering from this place of relation. We call those the thinking, the believing, the feeling, and the acting quadrants. Upon work on this, we are actually able to engage with each other. We're actually able to have a conversation that we've never had before. Please watch this next video as a creative executive who once was silent in the agency learned to discover his voice. His voice was discovered because of a situation in our society that no one could predict. The killing of two black men 2 days apart in July of 2017. Take a look, please.
Why your black coworker seems especially bitter today. Why your black coworker seems especially sad today. Why your black coworker seems especially quiet today. We are processing. We are asking ourselves what to do. We are hurt because it feels like watching our own selves get gunned down. We are telling ourselves, do not let this make you live in fear. Do not let this make you hate. But we're scared for our lives, our families' lives, our friends' lives. We're mad that the protests aren't working, why the video recordings aren't working. We're conflicted, in a place between crippling empathy for this man and his family and contempt at a world that seems not to care enough. We're disgusted at police, but telling ourselves, you can't hate all police. We're wondering what the point of a moment of silence is. We're wondering if we ourselves will make it back home today. We're wondering what to do, what to do, what to do. Just an FYI, not for sympathy, just acknowledging this because it should be acknowledged. The morning of out in Sterling's, when the news kind of bursted out, wake up in the morning, first thing you do is you pick up your phone, and that morning it just was a bad idea. It just hurt immediately. Like, I literally felt like in that moment, like I was him, and it was scary and painful. I'm on the bus, and I'm the only black person on the bus, and all the people on the bus are like, it's just another morning for them. And I was jealous and mad at that. I was mad that they weren't mad, and that was scary. That's a strange feeling to have. And then I show up here, one of the new guys that started with me, you know, we're cool. He was sitting there and he says, you know, the customary good morning, and I'm just like, I'm grumbling, like I'm like angry. And I was like, you know what? I need to like explain myself. Although I didn't have any expectations on what the email would do, like I said, I didn't think about sending it, think about what would happen after I sent it, think about the repercussions. I didn't think about any of that. I wasn't thinking. But I did, after the fact, thinking about it in retrospect, I found it super interesting that most of the initial replies were just thank you, because I didn't expect that. If anything, I expected the more later replies, like, yeah, I'm sorry, and like, this is messed up, and you know, I expected that, but someone somewhere was thinking I was feeling that, and I didn't exactly, you know, go out and say it, but you said it, and it's like a thank you. When someone expresses themselves, or people express themselves honestly and fully without restraint, that thing, whatever they express, takes on a life of its own, and it really, really, really has. Whenever someone comes across an article, or they have a feeling or a thought that is remotely connected to this, they dig up that email and they attach another email to it. And so it created a platform for us all to talk about this. And if I'm proud of anything, no, you didn't ask me that, but if I'm proud of anything, it's that I followed my gut in that moment, like, because like it's so important that, you know, we're all just pieces of this massive puzzle, and it's not right in the U.S. right now, but this is not all the way right, and it's the most important thing. It's the most important thing. It's life and death. People have died. People are dying, and we're alive, and we can do something about it.
When Curvins and I met several years ago, he was in that position that Micah Pollock describes as color mute. color mute is the companion of colorblind, one practicing not seeing race and the other practicing not revealing what the other is saying they're not seeing. My work has been to liberate us from this condition, this partnership that's ineffective, that doesn't allow us to see what's real. And one way of doing that has been the use of the compass, an ability to decide where it is that we're entering this story. Curvin's describing that he wasn't thinking, he was feeling. He was feeling what it felt like to be a black man in the United States, targeted by law enforcement. And as he came to work with that story on his heart, not in his head. He didn't want statistics. He wanted to be heard. And courageously, he sent that email out. I think about how useful the compass would have been for me at Park School. Back in 7th grade, when I knew that I had learned race through the feeling quadrant, and I met students and teachers who often didn't want to address race even from the thinking quadrant. The first thing would have been to instruct me to just notice that that's where I am. The second would have been to not simply use my feelings to navigate what's going on, but to activate other parts of who I am, my thinking, my deep-seated beliefs, as well as my ability to relate to people and discover how it is that they're addressing what's going on. Seeing is critical. Therefore, colorblindness says that we are not seeing. But just as I said, as I entered 7th grade, no one was at all unsure that I was black. The meaning affixed to it is where the colorblindness set in. And so I needed to see my classmates. I needed to see my teachers and see where they were located and be able to meet them where they are. Meeting them was not me sacrificing the feelings that I had. It was actually expanding those feelings and placing those feelings in the same frame that those that I was trying to engage with were at. Having tools and rules for interracial engagement, we no longer need to act like we don't see race. We can take off the blinders and become effective anti-racist leaders who not only know our own personal stories, but also examine and address how race impacts our families and impacts our work. Advancing beyond the delusionary colorblind mythology enables us to identify racial disparities and craft solutions for eliminating racism. This new way of being is a critical aspect for all of us. It's a way that we want to discover the world that's around us rather than act like we don't see those disparities that have existed for hundreds of years. Having developed thousands of educators around the world to remove the blinders and adopt a race-conscious stance, our Courageous Conversation partners are effectively doing the best work of their lives, including better educating all children, better creating diverse commercials with fair representation, better adjudicating adult and juvenile suspects, and better rendering medical treatment to the sick and to the elderly. In fact, a new way of being is racially conscious, which is required for us to be socially just, which is required for us to be human. I turn to the world's leading creative advertising agency, Courageous Conversation partner, Wieden & Kennedy, to develop a piece that I could leave with you this morning and punctuate this talk. A piece that would speak to the impact of Courageous Conversation as it has helped them to relinquish their blinders and move from colorblind racism to race-conscious activism. If you stick around for tomorrow's session, my Wieden & Kennedy colleagues and I will share with you groundbreaking work that has currently had profound impact on millions of viewers, agencies, and brands worldwide. But for now, I leave you with this short piece highlighting a new way of being. No longer colorblind, at Wieden & Kennedy, they are courageous, they are conscious, and they are now a community that we believe are doing the best work of their lives.
It's not just courageous that we exist. Our histories span borders, generational, and geographical.
It's not just courageous that we create. Our future demands that we pass down our wisdom to those like us.
It's not just courageous that we rebel against the systems made especially to keep us othered.
It's not just courageous that we assemble, each time strengthening our collective voices in the face of opposition.
It's not just courageous that we love openly, though we were once denied the right to do so.
It's not just courageous that we learn even as our own stories are repressed.
It's not just courageous that we persevere in a society that has at one time denied our humanity.
It's not just courageous that we smile, expressing the joy that our circumstances sometimes lessen.
And it's not just courageous that we thrive in spite of our identities.
It's revolutionary. Challenge the conversation. Change the conversation.
Thank you.